You're listening to the Coop Homeschool Podcast.
This is your podcast for community, humility, and joyful fun in homeschooling. I'm Mandy.
I'm Jessica.
And this is
The Coop. It's our Coop Book Club day.
Yay, it's fall. Time for book club.
I know, I love it. It's our new book. So we did one last year, and it's our book for 2021. And we chose Dumbing Us Down by John Taylor Gatto. Before we jump into it, let's do some scoop on the coop.
All right, well, I'll go first.
Okay.
My kids just had the opportunity to be in a photo shoot yesterday.
Yes.
Yeah, so that was really cool. They got to see what a photographer does, a model does, hair and makeup, a stylist, and even like a creative director.
Love it.
So that was really fun. And I got to be in a bathing suit in my mom bod running in slow motion like Baywatch. So that was awesome, let me just say.
Your hot girl summer.
Yeah. But it was really neat for them. They got to be in 3 different shoots in one day, 3 different locations, and even the spouse got involved. So,
I love it.
Everyone else on that day, were in the books, and we were living the careers.
That's right.
Yeah. So it was a cool way to do an educational day.
Yeah, I love it.
What about you?
Okay, well, this is kind of a funny story. So August is 3.5, and he doesn't know the proper names of everything, and he never ends up in our closet. I just hand him clothes and he puts them on. So he calls coat hangers hookers because he uses them to hook things.
Yeah, it's exactly what they are. They are hookers.
They are hookers.
Yeah.
But my adult brain has such a hard time reconciling that because I have a much different idea of what a hooker is.
Yeah.
And it is not something that hooks things.
Yeah.
That's just a hook.
Well, maybe they hook in different ways.
Right.
I don't know.
So he holds the long end of the clothes hanger so that he can grab things with his hook as though he had like hook hands like a pirate.
It's so funny.
And it's so funny. So I get home from a long weekend and he's yelling to me. I'm out in the garage and he's yelling to me from the kitchen. And he's like, "Hey, Mom, I've got a hooker." Yep. And then, we get to explore all things with the hooker that night. And then as he's going to bed, because I hadn't tucked him in for several nights, it was recital weekend. It was wild. So it's like a big moment that I get to put him to bed this night. And so he's like, "Mom, can I bring my hooker to bed?" So then I had to turn to my son and say, "Oh, no, we don't sleep with hookers in our bed." The hooker stays out of the bed. Oh, man.
It's so funny.
Right. And I'm not going to correct it because he's not wrong.
He's not wrong. It does hook on to things.
Right.
And things hook on to it.
And that's what I want to teach my kids, right?
Yeah.
It's like I want you to look at something and logically intuit what it might be called based on what its function is.
Oh, yeah.
That's
definitely.
what he did.
Yeah.
My definition of hooker is irrelevant here.
Yeah.
Anyway.
That's so fun.
Oh, I love kids and watching them grow.
Yeah. You need to write that down.
Yep. I need to put that somewhere. Maybe I'll capture a photo for our Instagram.
Yeah.
Be a good one. Okay. Let's get to dumbing us down.
Okay.
So I thought first I'd start with sharing a little bit about who John Taylor Gatto is, even though he does cover it a little bit in his preface. But just a brief summary, he's an American author, or was. He passed away 2 years ago.
Oh.
He was an American author and school teacher. After teaching for nearly 30 years, he authored several books on modern education, criticizing its ideology, history, and consequences. So he can be kind of controversial in the educational world. A lot of homeschool parents look to him for his wisdom, and it really solidifies a lot of the ideas of why we chose homeschooling. But it can also be very polarizing because he really is condemning compulsory government education. And so it can be kind of a scary topic for those people who are treading the line of homeschooling. I don't recommend this to people who are considering homeschool for the first time, who have come from loving public traditional education.
Unless
I know. It gets hard, right?
Because if you have any concerns about traditional education, right, then this might be a book you want to read.
Exactly.
To see if you agree with those concerns.
Yes.
But it could be much. It could be a bit much. It can be a lot feel a bit judgy, right?
It feels judgy, but yeah.
But that's because people with strong opinions always sound judgy.
Right.
If they're not in your camp.
Exactly. And it can feel a little bit attacking. So if you come from public education, I can imagine as an educator reading it, it would be a little bit much. It would feel a little bit like an attack.
However, it'd be painful, especially since he was a school teacher. So he actually has credibility. And, you know, if I having been a school teacher, just to jump into that for a second, I started to wonder through that lens if he's just a bit disgruntled.
Right.
And if that's also coming through because he's mad at something and becoming an extremist because of it.
Exactly. So we'll be able to answer more of those questions as we actually jump into the book. And so we're going to kind of just briefly go through the foreword because that's not actually his words, but it's written by Zachary Slayback, and he's author of The End of School and a founding member of Praxis, which is an apprenticeship program for young people looking for real world education. So he's an Ivy League dropout, and he talks about that, and he just talks about how he realized he had fallen in line and done all of these things but had no real world application. And so he ended up dropping out, and here he is, an entrepreneur and an author and all of these things. But he actually keeps a little card in his wallet with a John Taylor Gatto quote. So I'm going to say that for you right here. This is John Taylor Gatto, and he says, "You either learn your way towards writing your own script in life, or you unwittingly become an actor in someone else's script." And I love that one.
It's so good.
It's so good. And that's the thing, you know, like I want my kids to write their own script, you know, and
and he felt it in that first page too. He says, "I always knew there was something off about school when I was a student." So I think it's probably something that was dwelling inside of him for a very long time.
Yeah. And then he says it, and we both have this highlighted on the next page. He says, "Being a great student ended up holding me back."
Yeah, I actually wrote "so sad" next to it.
So sad. And it's so true. Like, I feel that way too. My goal was to be a good student, not to actually learn things or learn how I might use it in the world around me.
Oh, yeah. I mean, it was all about...
I wanted those A's.
It was, all about getting that report card.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah. Are you ready to move on to the preface?
Sure. I mean, I can talk about the forward.
Every page has flags and underlines and highlights.
There's a lot.
I wanted to jump into the preface because I think it's good to get into what he actually has to say.
Yeah.
So the preface isn't about the author. And so this is John Taylor Gatto writing, and he's just writing about his history. And so he was a school teacher, and he spent many of his years in New York City, like the city.
Well, yeah, he has the whole spectrum. He says Upper West Side, where, and then where the defense contracts are as well, at Columbia or near Columbia University. But then he also talks about Harlem, and Spanish Harlem, and where the city is very vulnerable.
Exactly.
Yeah. So he has the gamut that he's working from. It's not like he had one experience in those 30 years.
Exactly.
And repeated it for 30 years. He's had different experiences.
Yeah. I really found it interesting in the preface, and he starts talking about how he had become a teacher and he was really invested in all of this stuff, and then he started having trouble. And he says, "The trouble was that the unlikeliest kids kept demonstrating to me at random moments so many of the hallmarks of human excellence, insight, wisdom, justice, resourcefulness, courage, originality, that he became confused." And this is in the context of teaching at these elite schools where these kids were expected to be the best of the best. And then going into these inner city schools, or he was talking about actually being in, I think it's Pennsylvania for a while, and he was talking about these really, low income, neighborhoods and these, underprivileged kids, and he's talking about how even they were showing him all of these unique things, and that made him really have to step back and say, well, you're not fitting the model of who should be my bright
Right.
students,
Yeah.
who should be those ones doing that.
Well, I love the quote right above that. I've come to believe that genius is an exceedingly common human quality, probably natural to most of us.
Yep.
So what a great, hopeful perspective of people.
Exactly. So after all of his years investing in young people, he sees that. And then it was through those qualities that I was just saying, insight, wisdom, justice. They were able to look through that and question that rather than just take what they're given and move on. And then you don't actually get to see a child's genius,
Well, he mentions, so right below that, he says, I slowly began to realize that the bells and the confinement, we've talked about the bells to go to the bathroom and eat, the crazy sequences, the age segregation, the lack of privacy, the constant surveillance, and all, which we're going to be talking about all those, but and all the rest of national curriculum of schooling were designed exactly as if someone had set out to prevent children from learning how to think and act and to coax them into addiction and dependent behavior.
That one hits so hard.
What in the world? I mean, and
but it's true.
Yeah, and he was saying that I used my classes as a laboratory,
right,
where I could learn a broader range of what human possibility is. So he is super contemplative during his years of teaching. He's not just doing his rote, having been a school teacher myself, I know my second year, I was like, okay, I know what I'm doing. I know my course of study now.
You do your routine.
Yeah, and I was still forgetting that these kids had their own originality to offer.
Right.
And when they showed it to me, I was surprised.
Right.
I was like, oh! Right. And I would call home and I would say, oh, so-and-so said this today and was super creative in their imaginative, creative storytelling. And it's like, I was surprised.
Right.
Isn't
Which
that
now
sad?
As a mom, you're like, oh, that's gross.
I know.
You shouldn't be surprised.
Yeah.
All of these children are beautiful and original in their own ways if we let them be.
Yeah.
Yeah. But even saying to coax them into addiction and dependent behavior, because where are we teaching them to get their validation from?
From a stranger.
From a stranger and for doing certain things to get approval.
Yeah.
Such arbitrary things.
What did he, is it...
It's later, I think.
Okay,
yeah.
all right. Okay. I don't want to jump ahead.
But it's all intertwined.
Yeah,
really. Let's see. Oh, and then he talks about as many of the kids I taught as possible. So he wanted to go through these guerrilla exercises, he called them. His sort of anti-traditional educator role. So he calls them guerrilla exercises. He taught as possible the raw material people have always used to educate themselves: privacy, choice, freedom from surveillance, and as a broad range of situations and human associations as my limited power and resources could manage. So he ended up revising what he was trying to teach and not look at necessarily academic standards so much and start to teach what do they need.
I wonder when he became teacher of the year for New York, was it when he was doing that or when he was doing the more conformity?
I'm sure we can make some assumptions based on the speech he gives, which
that's
is
true.
chapter 1.
Yeah.
So I would be really interested to see a timeline of how his teaching evolved over the years. Is this
cool.
25 years in?
Yeah.
I'm not quite sure. This is just his general overview of his autobiography. But yeah, it's definitely very interesting. And then I move over to the sociology of government monopoly schools has evolved in such a way that a premise like his jeopardizes the total institution if it spreads.
Okay, what is that? What
So
does that
if
mean?
all of these educators start these guerrilla exercises, giving students privacy, autonomy, and freedom, and broad situations to explore in, what happings?
That jeopardizes the institution. Yeah.
Right.
Okay. Yeah.
So I thought that was a really interesting thing he poses out there. Yeah.
There were sometimes I think I was falling asleep at some point, and there was a lot of big words that were happening. So you can see the underlining.
The sociology of government monopoly. Yeah.
And it ceases and then it picks back up again. So I don't even know. Yeah.
Yeah.
But I wasn't falling asleep because it was boring. It was because it was literally late at night.
Right.
And the second someone starts praying or telling me about themselves, or the second I start reading, I fall asleep.
Exactly.
Yeah, so.
Yeah, it's a lot. And it's very dense.
Yeah, it is.
And yeah, he has strong opinions and he's a well-educated man. So his reading his work is definitely a lot. But he's short. I feel like this is a mercifully short.
Oh, yeah, it
book.
is. How many pages is it? Let's see. It is minus the postscript and the afterword. If you just wanted to read 105 pages.
Yeah. So it's super short, and they're
totally
big words.
Doable.
There's big words, and there's pictures, and all kinds of things mixed in here.
It fits in my thickness requirement.
Yes, exactly.
Less than an inch for sure.
Mercifully
More of
short.
a half an inch.
Yep. So then I go down, and people have been allowed to make their own mistakes and to try again, or they will never master themselves. Although they may well seem to be competent when they have, in fact, only memorized or imitated someone else's performance.
Oh, yeah. We have such a need to please and get the right grade that we
Right.
forgot. Well, that could be something you could learn in this moment.
There's all these expectations to have already learned things. And that's something that has been coming up as adults. And as I prepare curriculum or learning opportunities for my children, and I talk about it with other adults, the conversation comes up like, well, did you learn that? Did you, like at what point did you learn that? And you realize that even though there are standards, there is no standard. So then what are we all learning? And so the idea of being imposter syndrome, I think, also stems from the fact that we all believe that we should have learned the same things.
Oh, right. Yeah. Yeah. That we're all equally educated. And we're all equal. Yeah.
On the same subjects at the same, and not
equally
that's
gifted.
Not true.
Equally. Yeah.
It's not true.
Especially when people talk to you as if you do know what they're talking
Right.
about. And then you feel like bad outing yourself. Like, actually,
Right.
you got to start over. I didn't know anything you just said.
Yeah. Talk to me like I'm a 5-year-old.
Yeah, totally.
Anything else in the preface you wanted to mention?
So I starred something. Over the years, I've come to see that whatever I thought I was doing as a teacher, most of what I actually was doing was teaching an invisible curriculum that reinforced the myths of the school institution and those of an economy based on caste. Oh, and then I also I get out of the kids' way. What I do right is simple to understand. I get out of the kids' way.
Right.
I give them space and time and respect. And I wrote goals.
Right. Absolutely.
Next to it. Yeah. Get out of the kids' way. It's not that we can't
guide them
and can't teach them. I love the model of expert teaching. Let's save yourself a lot of the steps and mistakes. Learn from somebody else's, not your own all the time. It's good to learn from your own, as he mentioned, but it's also nice to learn from others so you don't, it doesn't take you so long to mature,
Right.
But I also love the giving them space and time and respect.
Yeah.
That's something I need to remember more.
It's a huge goal in my homeschooling for sure, is the time to explore topics on their own, and find how they might develop their own understanding and their own interest of those topics.
Yeah. When you look at what our kids are doing right now, they're playing right now, but what they were just doing outside is they used sidewalk chalk and they created this huge maze, and then they collected ants and they tried to send them on the maze.
Right. All on their own.
Yeah. There was no suggestion, no nothing. And they spent over an hour doing that.
Yeah. I'll post pictures to the Instagram. So
cute.
Yeah. So if you are interested in seeing what we're talking about, go to our Instagram, the Coop Homeschool.
Hey, did you think we were on a commercial break?
Gotcha.
Yeah. So as always, we love to talk, and our episode has gone way too long.
Yep.
So we're going to leave you with just the preface here, and you can tune in for next time for the Coop Q&A and for Chapter 1.
Yep.
So we'll see you next time.
Thanks for listening. We love your support. Be sure to subscribe to our podcast, leave a rating and review to let us know how we're doing, and share our podcast with your friends who need a little community, humility, and joyful fun in homeschooling.